I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Berkeley Fellowship of Unitarian Universalists to this hall. This is a town hall meeting on issues around KPFA, and we're going to have an open discussion, but first we are going to have some speakers speak to various issues for a few minutes apiece, and that will then be followed by some time for open discussion. So our first speaker to welcome you here is the chair of the Social Justice Committee of Berkeley Fellowship, and that is Vic Sado.
Thank you, Joy. It's a joy to work with you. Let me tell you about the Social Justice Committee a little bit. It's been here way before I was here, and a lot of things have happened in this historic little hall. We had a January 30th, 2012 Truth and Unity Forum for KPFA, and that's on our new YouTube site, Social Justice in the Heart of Berkeley. We have a new YouTube site with lots of playlists and some original things about Thomas Paine that we did right here. This month we've got a lot coming up. We have Transition Berkeley, showing a film, Growing Cities, right here on the 1st of May. We're co-sponsoring an interfaith panel, working together for a just peace in the Middle East. And that's ecumenical. That is not here. That's at another location. What is that? First Presbyterian Church of Oakland. Okay, so we're co-sponsors, as many other groups are. We don't want things to... Also, the Northern California 9/11 Truth Alliance meets over here first and third Thursdays of the month in the Fireside Room. We have a social justice meeting first and third Sundays at 12:30 over in the Fireside Room. It's on the second floor there. Lynn Stewart, we campaigned for her release from prison, and she's out doing a tour with Pan Africa, and that will be at the Humanist Hall. Also great allies of ours, and we'll be co-sponsoring that event at 6 p.m. with them. It's reception, 7 p.m. Humanist Hall. On the 8th, we're going to have a remembrance of John Judge, a great researcher on the Kennedy assassination, and he formed the 9/11 Citizens Watch. Probably a couple of months after it happened, he was on it. And then we're going to have one for Michael Rupert on the 23rd. So there'll be two conscientious projector about remembering some of our great scholars of the Truth Movement. Country Joe McDonald is going to be here on the 10th. He does the benefit for this congregation, of which he's a part of annually, and so tickets will probably sell out for that, so you can get them at the box office, which is our pretty common sense, and they come just from the grassroots of this Unitarian Universalist spiritual movement. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning, respecting everybody. So that's probably all much I really need to say right now about it. I know people have strong feelings about what's happened, and we just want to know why it's happening, and we want to get stuff on the public record. And people are here from United for Community Radio and from Save KPFA, and from a very independent and concerned perspectives. So let's see what happens, and let's try to make it enjoyable and civil. I believe Steve is coming up next to have. He's one of the persons who proposed this. He does Work Week Radio every other Monday on the Morning Mix show, which is volunteers. It doesn't cost the station or the Pacifica anything, and it does a hell of a good job, and it's sometimes more professional than the people that say otherwise. Steve.
Thank you. Well, thank you, brothers and sisters, for coming this afternoon, and I'm glad the rain cleared up, made it easier to come out. So my name is Steve Zeltzer, and I am with the Labor Video Project. We do labor media, and also I produce a show called Work Week Radio on KPFA. And I've been involved with KPFA for a long time, since 1995 when I had a labor segment there. And I think that the reason I wanted to have this forum, and we need a forum, is we need more debate and discussion about what's going on at KPFA and Pacifica. And the only way we're going to do that is to have town hall meetings like this, and to have also debate and discussion on the airwaves, which unfortunately hasn't really happened at KPFA and Pacifica. That should be a vehicle for debate and discussion for different points of view. And we've invited all sides, all points of view to come to the meeting today and to give their point of view about what the issues are and how to resolve the issue in the future of KPFA and Pacifica. As most of you know, there's a massive attack on working people in this country, on labor. There are millions of homeless. There are millions of people who have been dispossessed from their homes. There are millions of unemployed, and we're in a great crisis, including the danger of a war now with Russia and a U.S. invasion of Ukraine. Really, that's what's going on. So we're in a very dangerous world situation. And Pacifica and KPFA is the only vehicle, national broadcast vehicle, that people can hear an alternative point of view from the corporate-controlled media. That is a fact, and that's why the protection and defense of KPFA and Pacifica is so critical, because we need a voice so that people can get alternative points of view and an alternative to the corporate-controlled media. And our view has been, and my view has been, is that one of the reasons that Pacifica and KPFA is not growing is it's not really having new programming, and it's not really becoming a multimedia platform, which is one of the things I think has to happen. Everybody knows democracy now is a video, not only an audio program, but it's a video program. And our view is that we have to do that at KPFA and Pacifica. And we've been fighting. We have a streaming channel at KPFA now so that community events, labor events could be broadcast live on this channel. And this coming Thursday, May Day, Umthuza Kwango, who's the treasurer of NUMSA, National Union of Metal Workers, is going to be speaking in San Francisco at the ILWU Local 10, and we're going to be broadcasting that on the streaming channel. But we hope that more and more community events, labor events, can be broadcast on this channel at KPFA. And also, there's another station called KPFB. Do people know about that? It's actually for Berkeley. But it's a station that's an internet, and we've argued, and we've got the support of most of the unpaid staff, that we need to open that station up with additional programming. One of the things is there's a lot of programs that have been on many, many years at KPFA. We need to have new programming. We need to have new voices at KPFA and Pacifica that people hear, and that will be one way of revitalizing KPFA and Pacifica, by having new programming, new voices. And we can use KPFB, which is already there, and a station to do that. So that's another thing that we're proposing. Now, the last thing I want to make is that there are many issues, particularly about the financial crisis, and we'll get into them, I think, from the speakers. But in my view, and our view, we need financial transparency. We need to know where the money is going and if it's being properly reported and used. And for the unpaid staff, I'm not a staff representative, but I'm a member of the unpaid staff organization. The question is, we need more support. The unpaid staff need more support. We don't have a line producer, for example, for the morning mix, and the money is not going to the unpaid staff, in my view, and that has to change at KPFA. So those are some of the issues that we're going to be addressing here today, and I'm glad you've all made it. And this is an open debate. We offered all sides an opportunity, so we'll have a broad and open discussion. And it's also being recorded, and we're going to get it up on YouTube so people can watch it and learn as much as they can about what's happening at Pacifica and KPFA. So thank you.
Thank you to Steve and to Vic. And our next scheduled speaker is Tracy Rosenberg, past Pacifica board member. Is that correct? That's correct. All right.
Hi, everyone. Okay. So I'm guessing there's sort of differing levels of absorption of all of the details of this situation in the room. So for those of you who are a little more heavily enmeshed in all of this than others, forgive me because I'm going to just try to lay out some basic sets of information. And if there's specific stuff that you have questions about that I haven't covered, because there is a broad range of details out there, I'm really happy to answer questions either later on in the event or after we're concluded. So I kind of wanted to talk about 4 basic things. The first was I wanted to break down a little bit the various and sundry lawsuits that are going on currently, because I know that's a confusing amount of details. And the amount of people that really want to download legal briefs and read them is pretty low. I wanted to talk a little bit about the network as a whole, because I think that's important. Of course, KPFA is our part of the network that we feel that's right here, kind of down the road, but there are 4 other stations and 180 affiliated stations, and they're also a part of this saga that's going on, so I wanted to kind of tell you a little bit about them and the role that they're playing. I wanted to just briefly touch on finances, and there's no PowerPoint and there's no spreadsheet, and it will be short. I just wanted to talk a bit about what's going on currently. And then a little bit of some of the broader issues that Steve had mentioned about sort of, what the struggle is really about and why this has been going on for the better part of either 10 years, 20 years, or 50 years, depending on your time span and your particular philosophy, but certainly for a very long time. This is just episode number 77 of an ongoing saga. And it's important to say that, because I think always for anyone, when you're in the middle of what is turning into a very ugly family fight, it's really important to be clear what you're actually fighting about. So I want to put out a little bit of a vision of what I think the fight is actually about. Okay, so the lawsuits. Essentially, what brought us to this point was a set of actions that happened in the past month that were certainly abrupt and kind of surprising, with a very narrow majority on the board. And I want to be clear that many of the years I've been on the board, I've had a narrow majority for, my side. It's been 12 to 10, 13 to 9, 11 to 11, depending. And one of the rules when you're in that kind of situation is abrupt doesn't work, because stuff goes wrong, because you have a narrowly divided board, which means that you've got to have a certain amount of dialogue, you've got to have a certain amount of buy-in from the other side, or all hell's going to break loose. But apparently that philosophy about 12 to 10 was not one embraced by the folks that were sitting on the 12. And they did a bunch of really abrupt things. Within 1 week, they attempted to fire an executive director who had been hired literally 6 weeks ago with a 3-year contract for $315,000 in compensation for the written reason that the individual didn't have a social security number. That's the written reason, and it's in writing. Not work performance, not disciplinary action, not any of the normal reasons that you would fire someone. This very personal thing. And I want to be clear, and I'm not speaking for Summer Reese here. Whatever her personal reasons are, they have to do with being a radical Catholic and a war resistor. They are personal, they are religious, and she's 43 years old, and this is a decision that was made a very long time ago. And the consequences are between her and the Internal Revenue Service. Those are the facts. Some people I know have lots of hands-on experience with tax resistance, and some people don't. But it's certainly something not unknown of in the history of the left. And the point is, it's now become a national issue when essentially it's a personal decision with personal consequences. And I will say that several fairly eminent lawyers, when brought into the room to hear about this decision to fire because of the lack of a social security number, said very loudly, "Oh God, don't do that." Nonetheless, it was done. A chief financial officer was rehired despite pending complaints from 5 coworkers, and a 990 form that was filed without $1 million in grants recorded on it and has to be refiled. So these sorts of actions, all of which happened 1 week after folks got on the board. They got there and, you know, it was a slammo-bammo-jammo kind of thing. Obviously didn't sit real well with the other half of the board. They didn't sit real well with the attorneys, the corporate counsel. His name is Terry Gross, and he's a fairly eminent public media lawyer, resigned. They didn't sit well with a significant chunk of the public. So given that situation, K lawsuit was filed. And what I want to be clear about is it's not a lawsuit for anybody to get paid any money. It's not a lawsuit for damages. It's not a lawsuit for punitive complaints. It's a lawsuit for basically stop acting crazy, because we're on the board too, and we're responsible for this, and we're not real comfortable with what's going on here. So basically, the lawsuit is asking for conjunctive relief. It's asking for the court to say these actions, in the way that you took them, not that you don't have the right to hire or fire, but the process that you followed, the reasons that you put out, and the actions that you took in the way that you took them were not okay, and were not in the best interest of the foundation that you're supposed to be serving, so we need to roll this back. That's the lawsuit. The injunction request will be heard on May 6th. And it is 9 directors suing 12 directors, with 1 director sitting the whole thing out. That lawsuit is called PDGG versus Pacifica, Pacifica Directors for Good, Pacifica Directors for Good Governance. Okay. On Monday morning, there will be another hearing, because the reaction to this request for injunctive relief was a little bombastic, and now there's a request basically to authorize the police to raid the national office and remove the folks who have been occupying it since March. My personal opinion, it's not a high percentage action, and I believe that the judge is not inclined to grant it come Monday, but you never know, because you walk into a court, anything can happen. There's a certain level of irony, as always, in Pacificans going to the police to settle their own problems. I mean, we talk a lot about police brutality, we talk a lot about the injustice system, and there's a reason why the Berkeley police doesn't really want to go in there, and they already told us that, because they think it's a civil disagreement. It's not a police situation. It's basically something that has to be worked out regarding whether an employment contract is valid or not. There's no crime going on. But the response to that was, well, we'll go into court and try to get something so we can force the police to basically bust the premises open and throw people out. So that's what we're looking at Monday morning. If anybody wants to come, it will be at 1221 Oak Street in Department 15 at 9 a.m. So that's basically where we are with the lawsuits. I think what the directors themselves could say if they were here, and the reason that your Berkeley listener rep from UCR is not here, is that they actually scheduled an impromptu board meeting this afternoon, so she couldn't come, and she apologizes. Her name is Janet Coburn. But I think what she would say if she were here is that we filed this lawsuit because we felt that those hasty and reckless actions that I've described, and there are others, were going to provoke a whole bunch of lawsuits. In other words, we thought the person who had an employee contract and who really shouldn't be fired because they won't disclose their social security number for religious reasons could sue us. The individuals who complained about this chief financial officer, they felt there were workplace issues that haven't been addressed. They could sue. In other words, they felt there were a whole bunch of people basically lined up for monetary lawsuits who were being given cases, who were being given things that upset them, and that their lawsuit was an attempt to head that off in a no money or a low money way. And I'm not going to say no money because there's no such thing as a no money lawsuit, but it's a low money lawsuit. Okay, I need to speed it up. So quickly, when it comes to the Pacifica network, how many more minutes? 1? I can't do this in 1, Vic. All right, so let's skip to what this is really about. There's an idea of community radio that is essentially giving an outlet to the energies of the community. It's in the mission statement. And there's a question of whether we have a KPFA that has an open door or a closed door. I don't know how many of you have interacted with KPFA, if it's been easy, if it's been difficult. I certainly think that's something to kind of keep in mind. In other words, are your creative outlets exercised by having this in your community? Do you feel like if you wanted to interact with the radio station in K-Direct way, you could? Do you feel like you have to know somebody? These are some of the issues that come up with community versus professional public radio, and which we're really trying to do. There's national versus local. Do we really want to operate 5 radio stations, or are we only interested in one radio station? And is there value in having a national network? I think there is. And when you look at Pacifica, Pacifica is responsible for all 5, not just for one. Does local control make things better? Well, it can, but then you look at something like WBAI having their phones turned off yesterday, which is what happened because they didn't pay the phone bill, and you say that's not local control, that's lack of local control, that's lack of control entirely. And are we running a professional institution, or are we basically messing around with you're not the boss of me while the phones get turned off? Those are important issues. And then there's basic transparency and accountability. People got mad at me because I put out in a release that $85,000 had been taken from KPFA to pay bills on the East Coast, which is absolutely true. And it didn't make anybody look good, because that shouldn't be happening. But what I said was we can't keep that a secret from the listeners, one way or the other. And we can't solve these problems if we're not clear about what they are. And I want to see all 5 stations thrive. I don't want to see them cannibalized, one to feed the other. That's about the ugliest progressive media scenario that I can imagine. But to do that, we have to be straightforward about what the problems are. And we have to let people work for us to try to solve them without eating them alive every time they try. So I'm going to stop there.
Scheduled speaker is Frank Sterling, who is on the local station board. Back there.
I'm not the greatest public speaker, but I'll work on what I can do. I am a member of the local station board, and I think it's my 2nd term now. I was kind of squeezed in after someone backed out, so I actually didn't get elected. I was 2nd, and then I got re-elected the 2nd time. So I am an elected member of the local station board, and I would just like to talk a little bit about a couple of the things before I get to what I feel about the whole situation in Pacifica. But one is what Steve Zeltzer mentioned about the video broadcasting. I feel like the video broadcasting could be a great plus for KPFA, and Steve's put a lot of video broadcasts together. I myself have put a number of them together. My favorite one was the Iraq Veterans Against the War Roundtable. We had an hour-and-a-half discussion about what Iraq Veterans Against the War talk about, stuff about, they work with the military and what they're doing, counter-recruitment, military sexual trauma, stuff like that. And it was great. We had a lot of viewers, and I think if we really work on the video broadcasting, and there's like ideas to put a donate button near the video broadcasting, people could donate online when they're watching a video broadcast. So I would be really happy to continue video broadcasting. Right now we're doing a critical conversations on emerging technology speaking series. A lot of people have went to the last one. There's another one that's gonna be Wednesday. I'll just make a quick announcement while I'm here. Wednesday at the Brower Center. It'll be about genetically modified foods and synthetic biology and farming. So these are the kind of video broadcasts that I feel like are important to KPFA and could really make a difference. You see Democracy Now! Is on TV. I think the guy that does the Fridays spot instead of Mitch, I can't think of his name right now, but 10 o'clock on Fridays, I think he's getting a video on the local community access channel where he's at. And also in LA, I think Sonali Kohatkar got a video spot on their local TV channel. So I think a lot of the broadcasting is moving towards video as well as radio. So I think that's very important to work on. Also, some of our web issues, I think we have some issues with our web, and we're working hard to get our web guy some training. I think is the next step, really, to get training for our web. There's been a lot of questions with how our web works, and just getting to the video broadcasting stream is kind of a challenge. You have to click on the left-hand side of the screen where it says video broadcast takes you to another page. You have to go down to the bottom and click there. So we're really trying to get our web updated so when there's a video broadcast, you just have a big button like the donate page. Donate now or continue the website, but it'll just say video broadcast or continue the website. So I think getting some training for our web guy will make our web page a lot better, and the video broadcasting will be a lot smoother. Right now, you don't even know what is coming up for a video broadcast because you go to the web page and there's not even a list of events. But as Steve mentioned, there's 2 coming next week, and who knows about them? Nobody knows about them. So it's hard to get the word out for these. So we're working real hard to get the word out for our video broadcasting, which I feel is going to be part of the future of KPFA. Also, from the last town hall meeting, I don't know how many of you were at that last town hall meeting. There was a lot of talk about more activism radio, you know, to organize. I feel like KPFA misses a lot of chances to rally people to get to demonstrations. There was a huge fracking demonstration in Sacramento. I didn't even hear about it on KPFA. And I got there was thousands of people there. And we could have made it tens of thousands, I think. If you guys remember the big May Day protest in Los Angeles, where they had all the big demonstrations and the police came and broke all up, that was mainly due to the Spanish-speaking radio really putting out the word for that. So I feel like if we use KPFA to organize more activism, a lot of our events that the community members are throwing, I think I'm trying to get a little lower so I can speak in this, we could raise a lot more people power to get to these events on the important issues that KPFA covers. So I think in the future, we should look to maybe having an activism, even a National Activism Day, which was the last Saturday in April or March, I think, and I missed it. I wanted to promote something in the station, but maybe next year. But we should see what it's like to actually have a more activism-based organizing tool, KPFA, instead of just distributing news and information, but what to do about it, where to be, and when to be there. And I feel like that's very important. I was asked to mention a little bit about the paid and unpaid staff differential there. I get paid 4 hours a week, but for a long time I volunteered. I spend about 25 hours a week at the station working with the apprentices in the apprenticeship program. To me, KPFA taught me the value of a union and how the unions work, but sometimes I feel that it's not always fair at KPFA because there's so many people that are unpaid but don't get no representation. And just a couple of small examples would be childcare. People in the union will get childcare, by other people that are not in the union don't get paid childcare. Another one is half-time pay. So let's say I'm not in the union or paid staff over 20 hours, and I go to fill in for someone that's in the union. They only want to pay me half of those hours. So I didn't do it unless they paid me the full hours, and they ended up paying me the full hours. But that's just kind of the unfair stuff that happens there that I feel like should be kind of worked out. You know, if I'm going to do the same job as somebody else, I feel like I should get the hours. But the system is set up that you only get half the pay. Another thing, I don't know if people really care, but you know, if you've been there a long time and you're official paid staff, you get annual raises. And people like me that have been there coming up on 10 years, I've never had a raise, even for my 4 hours. I just stay at the same rate like everybody else did. Occasionally works. So those are just 3 small examples. I'm not sure how much time I have, but I would like to, I guess, I could probably read something that I had wrote about my thoughts at the Pacifica National Office. Being on the local station board, you know, we were all kept in the dark. The local station board does not communicate on their 2 halves, the people that are on one side or the other. And I think that was what really blindsided us when the decision to remove the executive director happened. There was no communication. I know that we're on 2 different sides, but we're really on one big side, which is KPFA. Am I running out of time? 5 minutes? Okay, thank you. All right, I got plenty of time for me. And so I'll just read what I tried to submit to the local station board. I think it was the first meeting held after the election, after the decision to fire the executive director. And what I wrote was that I wanted to know why our PNB representatives would make such a move without even consulting the other members of the LSB, who are they representatives, elected representatives of us. There was no advance warning, and we literally had no idea this was coming. And I question, is that the way it should work? I know that people have their agendas and their plans, but I think we should communicate as an entire local station board, not just make the decisions with our little cliques or our, whatever they're called, slates, and then just move ahead. The local station board is supposed to be one body, and I think a decision such as that should have been brought to our attention, and I would hope that my side would have made the attempt to communicate. I couldn't guarantee that would happen, but I certainly would be one to say that we should. I've been over there in the Pacific office in the first few weeks that it happened and showed my support because I'm more for the process. To me, the process was in the dark and none of us knew about it on the local station board. And then we don't know what happens in executive session at the national board and we're not allowed to. So it was really in the dark for me. One time when we were in a heated discussion at the Pacifica National Office when some of the other people came over to try to let us in and they were inside, we were like arguing back and forth. I mentioned to the secretary that there was no communication with us, the other side of the local station board, and he said to me that I've been on the board long enough to know that's not the way we work. And so that's what I'm trying to question. Is that the way we should work when we're trying to unite a group of individuals towards a common cause? We should be communicating. Even if we are gonna say, no, we don't want that, at least we have an idea it's happening instead of like waking up the next day and we have no executive director after going to bed the night before. It was really a shock. I also explained to the LSB at that meeting that I also felt like that it was not just a dangerous move for the station and the network, but what thought are they giving to the owners of the station? What kind of consideration do they give to the thousands of listeners who are actually the ones to pay to keep the station operating? Everybody donates to KPFA. That does donate is part owner, I feel like, of KPFA. And I don't feel like that you, if you're donators and listeners, should be just there to serve the beck and call of, we're raising funds, please donate, here's a DVD or a CD. But when decisions like this are made, it affects all of us, the listeners, the supporters, the people that actually pay for KPFA. So I feel like they didn't give no consideration to the listeners. And I don't know an exact way that we could poll our listeners or how we can get feedback from listeners, but I think it's an important issue that we try to figure out. What would the listeners think about us firing the executive director? What would the listeners think about us making giant program changes across the grid? These are things that I feel like need to be communicated to the listeners. Well, I wrote a big old thing. I guess I got 1 minute. I'll just briefly say about the Save KPFA site. So for the Save KPFA site, I'm all about getting the word out on particular issues, but I feel like what gets written on that site and presented, to me, rivals like Fox News and stuff I see on there. Only it's always anonymous. They never give the reader an accurate portrayal of the other side, where they're coming from. It seems to always be spin to me. And the person that chooses to write Save KPFA's page always remains anonymous. But there's a lot of articles and stuff floating around on the internet right now, but usually they have an author, a person who wrote it at the beginning or at the end, and I feel like that's important. On the LSB, Save KPFA, I'm on the LSB as an elected member. Save KPFA sometimes will put out blasts of emails. Email your local station board members. So one day I opened my email and I had thousands of emails. So I started going through them. A lot of them were automated, and then I was like, okay, let me try to respond to a couple. Is this it for me? So I'll just say, all right, so I tried to respond to a couple, but I couldn't send my response. So to me, it felt like Save KPFA site is a one-way thing of information, because I took the time to read emails and I went to reply, and I could not reply to people that were sending me emails. So for Save KPFA writers and readers, I feel like it's pretty one-sided too. I would seek alternative information as well. And I would wonder why that they don't let you respond, with an alternative view, because I tried and I was denied. All right, thank you.
Our last scheduled speaker is Carol Travis, who is the chair of the local station board.
Hello. I think a lot of you don't know me. I've only been in the Bay Area about 6 years. So I want to tell you a couple of things about me, because if I had been here longer, I'm sure we would have known each other. I was president of a United Auto Workers local union in LaGrange, Illinois, outside Chicago. 9,000 workers building locomotives for General Motors. I was president of that local for 8 years. At that time, I was hired by SEIU, this was quite a long time ago, to be their Midwest Regional Director, and then the head of the Executive Director of the Illinois State Council. While I worked in the factory, I went to law school at night, so I'm a lawyer. I am licensed in Illinois, and most of my work at this time revolves around Pelican Bay and the hunger strikers. I am part of the constitutional challenge to the use of long-term solitary confinement in California under the 8th and 14th Amendment. 8th, cruel and unusual, 14th, due process. So that's a little bit about who I am. Since I've been chairman of the board, I think the people who are here on the board, including Frank, would probably agree that we've had a very good working relationship on the board. A lot of our votes have been unanimous. It has not been contentious. It has been cooperative, and that's something I'm very focused and interested in. I will be brief. It has been said by Tracy in terms of the lawsuit that the minority directors filed a temporary restraining order and that there'll be a hearing, I guess, on March 6th. There was an earlier hearing where there was a hope of a restraining order, and that didn't happen, so it failed in the first round. There is now another lawsuit asking that Summer vacate the premises. I think probably the failure of BAI's phone bill is likely to be because of the mess and the inability to access and the argument about where the power is, where the money is, where the books are, so on. Even Summer would have to agree that Margie Wilkinson is, even if she disagrees, and the lawsuit doesn't seem to disagree that she's chair of the board, but that she's a director and that she has a right to see the books. And she has been denied a right to see the books to get into the office. This is making the process of dealing with Pacifica near impossible. And she was fired. The terms of the firing, the existence or non-existence of a contract is something we could argue about, and I don't want to. She herself says that she was, that there's a narrow majority. Well, that indicates she recognizes that there's a majority. The majority voted to fire her. And then she has been trespassing with a number of the rest of you in the office and blocking the effective work of Pacifica. You know, there's so many things to say and so many arguments on so many levels. I think that it is true that all sides really understands the preciousness of Pacifica and KPFA, and that it is incumbent upon us to find a way to the other side of this that stops tearing this apart. That is the way that I've been trying to chair this board, and that is what I feel that we have to do. And the obstructionism that's going on is not permitting that. I'll finish. 5 minutes is enough for me. I mean, that's all right. I mean, I could talk for hours. I think that the details will be fought about on every level. Each detail will be, you know, this is that, no, that's not that, this is this, no, that's not that. The fact of the matter is, Summer, and those of you who are blocking entrance by the executive, the head of the board, is blocking the ability of Pacifica to operate. It can be challenged. It's going to be challenged in the court both tomorrow and on May 6th. And since you've gone to the courts, I presume you will stand by what the courts do. I know that's a big presumption.
Thank you, Carol. So now we have time for people to come up and speak, and we're going to strictly limit this so that everyone gets a chance to speak for 3 minutes apiece. And I guess Vic is going to be our timekeeper, just to let you know when 3 minutes have passed, and then please wind it up. And we do want to stress the idea that is on the handout you have about deep listening that Addie Bianchi had talked about, I guess, last time you had an open forum. So, and that's not easy. Listening is not easy. Speaking is easier. So I ask that you listen to one another as deeply as you can, understand what's being said, and be as courteous and constructive as you can. Please, no name calling. Just speak your truth as you see it. And this will be the mic from which you are invited to speak. So let's begin. We'll start here. Yes. Yeah, but let's let others get a chance first, and if you want to come back up, sure, if we have time.
Thank you. My name is Max Blanchet, and I serve on the board somewhat 6, 7. Thank you. I have been following the finances of the institution, and thanks. Let me clarify something. There is no such thing as a legally autonomous KPFA. There is only one institution, and it's Pacifica. The legal institution is Pacifica. It has 5 stations, it has its archives, it's affiliated with a number of organizations throughout the country. But there is one legal institution, Pacifica. And that's the institution that is worth saving. This business of saving KPFA show how narrow-minded some people are. So keep this in mind. Now, about our finances, I looked at the financial report for the last fiscal year. It's not complete, it has not been audited. It shows that expenses exceeded income by $1.8 million. I'm not making this up. Likewise, at KPFA, the figure was roughly $250,000. The idea that KPFA somehow, if it were on its own, would be solvent, I think it's rubbish. Because KPFA, having the deep pockets, if you believe certain sectors, would be responsible for the liabilities of this institution. And they exceed $3 million, including $2 million owed to Democracy Now! The reason that we continue to operate today is because we use Democracy Now! As our bank. They allow us to do that for reasons that are not entirely clear to me. I think we should be forcing them to sit down with us and negotiate. The contract we had with them was a bad contract. We gave away the store. Let's be blunt about it. Okay? We owe them about $2 million. And every year we pay them $650,000. The fact that they can manage without our money is an indication that they have other sources of income. I will stop here. I thank you very much. It's a good assistance on such a beautiful day. Thanks. But stay involved.
And then just, we won't have to waste time in between. We'll just move from one to the other. But please keep your eye on Vic and the time.
Hi, my name is Steve Kessler. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up down on the peninsula. I was young in the peninsula when I'm not sure I grew up. I first heard about KPFA when I was a freshman or sophomore, so I've almost had 51 years now of KPFA, do the math. And in 1969, I was on a great show that has never really been replicated in my view, called Surplus Profits. And I was on with Todd Gitlin and Bobby Seal talking about my draft resistance case. And I've been on a couple times on labor issues. I'm really upset. One of my closest friends, somebody I knew since the early 70s when I moved to Berkeley, escaped from the peninsula, he wouldn't come today, and he said that our side simply will pack the meeting and just didn't want it to come. I think he's really closed-minded, but that is not the entirety of the problem. He happens to be in the Wellstone Democratic Renewal Club just for identification purposes. What concerns me is just as much is that there's a guy who's very close to us in the past and has not been one of these left-wing academics who gets seduced by people who are going to interview him for a book review of his latest book amongst the paid staff. But it's been on our side, so to speak, is disgusted about what's happening. And I want us to initiate a discussion about what sectors we can try to engage to organize new listeners, and how do we expand the listenership and have an expressive means of being a movement and not focus on the governance per se of the institution, but how we can be considered as members and have expressive needs that make sense practically, and how we could do that. And I've got some ideas I'd like to share. Thank you.
Gene Herman, I'm Vice President of the Board of Trustees of this nefarious institution. Having been on working for the State of Education, State of New York Higher Education, and similar capacity here in California, there has to be some rules and regulations of operation for the board. In the meeting of an LSB, are all board members notified of the meeting, and are they expected to attend? I can get these answers from somebody who knows the information and is articulate and concise. Are the books open to the members of supporters of KPFA? Can I come into the station as a person who loves this station and would dearly miss it if it was gone, listening for over 30 years? Dolores and I listen in the morning news, the evening news, and stuff in between. And one more question, the hiring process. If this woman was hired, was she hired legally in the sense that the right people authorized her hiring? And if she was terminated, was she terminated in the proper way? You have to, if you're going to run an operation as big as KPFA, you really need to do it legitimately, honestly, and otherwise, you know, you're going to end up like a cockamamie operation. And it's been pretty sad for the past few years listening to all the crap that comes between. Just try to resolve the problem and get the damn thing, get the station running in the black.
My name is Hep. I was a LSB member down at KPFT in the early 2000s. And,
Talking to Mike. Yeah, you get that mic closer.
yeah, right there. So I've seen a similar thing like this, you know, I guess relative to when everybody got in the battle back in the late 90s. But so one thing I learned is when the people in power want to negotiate, that's a red flag, and you should not step back and wait. You should just keep going forward and keep trying to either kick them out or vote them out or legalize them out. So don't waste any time waiting to talk, or that's a delaying tactic. I don't know what Siegel and Lee and Fuentes want, but The way they're going about it doesn't seem right, and I believe it's time to set up a pressure campaign to let their clients that they do business with know kind of their nefarious actions, including their, lack of contract law and their conflicts of interest. And I think it's time we set up a listener and unpaid staff union, a dues collecting union that can defend the listeners and the unpaid staff against the managers and the unionized staff. And the final thing would be to change the bylaws and make sure that the elected reps have to answer to their constituencies, and the constituencies have to sign off on all the meetings. So that would mean a kind of a radical change the way it is now. No more electing reps that say, I was elected to do what I think is best. They should reflect the will of their constituencies and not do what they think is best.
My name is Artis Galoo. I have been listening to KPFA since I was a rebellious teenager many years ago. But nevertheless, it's very confusing what's going on. I have been a member, but I don't think I'm a member anymore. I get to make lots of phone calls to find out if I am one or not. You would think they'd want my money. But money is the big issue here. There was an AM DJ in '99 who said that 94.1 broadcasting is very valuable. A lot of people want it. There may be reasons why dissension is being sowed getting people to fight so that somebody can get that 94.1 signal. And we need to think about it, and we need to find out how much money there is. And I think when money is spent in budgets, it should be darkened or bigger or something so everybody can see how much money is being spent and on what.
My name is Daniel Borgstrom, and I'm one of the occupiers at the Pacifica headquarters. Not a trespasser. I am an occupier, one of the many. There's many of us, and I want to say that I've been attending LSB meetings, local station board meetings, for the last, since 2005. I guess that's about 9 years. That's a while now, isn't it? And I do my best to keep up on what's happening here. I write articles about it. Now, speaking of occupying, I was in Occupy Oakland. I've been in other occupations too. Occupy Oakland, for one. I was twice arrested there. On one occasion, police pointed a shotgun in my face. Not a pleasant experience. They exploded these bombs around me, etc. Now, I kind of expect it from the Oakland city government. But now, I understand that Safe KPFA is trying to do the same thing here, setting the police after us. Here's a court declaration. It's signed by Margie Wilkinson of Safe KPFA. Let me just read a couple of lines from it. She says, the board has sought the assistance of the Berkeley Police Department. And here I'm skipping a bit. The foundation has previously applied for a citizen's arrest to the Berkeley Police Department, etc. And I'm skipping again. The police department has stated that it would enforce a temporary restraining order if this court were to issue one. Safe KPFA wants to arrest us. That's the way it is. I mean, you have people pretending to be progressive, setting out to arrest use police against their opposition. I think that's disgusting.
My name is Marilyn Langlois. I live in Richmond, and I've been a long-time listener and supporter of KPFA and Pacifica. Whenever in any organization you have conflicts and very deep differences, it's always important to be able to rely on your process to work through things in a way that's going to be constructive. And there is a process at Pacifica. It may not be perfect, but there are bylaws and there is a process. So what really disturbs me is the way in which the attempt was made to fire the Executive Director Summer Reese. It was at a special board meeting where It was not announced that this was even on the agenda. The board members did not know in advance this would be coming up. It was brought up at the very end of the meeting. The board did not have any discussion about it. And bam, she's fired. No attempt at all at progressive discipline, doing a performance review, trying to identify what her shortcomings are and fix them. No, it just bam, fired. And this is disturbing because what kind of a message does it send to the other employees and to the listeners that we have a board who will so capriciously just fire somebody if they don't like them without following the process? So I say, if you think she has deficiencies, go back, do a thorough performance review, try to fix the problem. If she persists and you can't fix it, agendize it, discuss it thoroughly, and then take your vote on the decision. Go back and do that. Again, it wasn't just the firing, it was the rehiring of a former CFO who apparently had been let go for cause by a previous board, was very suddenly, precipitously rehired without any legwork, discussion, outreach, and that sort of thing. So this was these are a couple of the precipitous actions I'm really disturbed about. Also concerned about the finances. I've talked with Summer on a number of occasions. She seems very concerned with having more transparency in the finances and having more internal controls in the accounting. That's the purpose of the national office, to have those full internal controls to make sure we know where we stand so we can live within our budget. Also, I agree we need to look at all these other innovative ways to increase our listenership, and I also agree we need to work on renegotiating the contract with Democracy Now! I was quite shocked to learn that Democracy Now!, which originated within a Pacifica station, was given away and that we have to pay for it. We shouldn't have to pay anything for Democracy Now! To be broadcast on our airwaves through Pacifica. Thank you.
I'm a long-time member here at BFUU and also a long-time listener to KPFA. I want KPFA to stay on the air because Mary Berg, I love you. I love Kevin Vance doing a wonderful job. Mary, we'd like to have you back for Bach's daytime job on Sunday morning, which I very much, what can I say? I'm a Bach junkie. And also Phil Waldry, others, and other programs I don't necessarily listen to that much, but KPFA, you're a voice for a liberal voice in our community, and I know just when I would start to think maybe it's the Washington heavies who write grants or permit grants to be given to Pacifica, their right to KPFA, clamping down on Pacifica saying, you better stop those KPFA commies or something like that. And somebody said, Tom, that was simply that political. It wasn't, it's not. It turns out to be bookkeeping. For KPFA, just, kind of get your bookkeeping together. I'll support you, because I want to see you stay on the air. God bless you.
I'm very concerned about the termination of Summer Reese and the way it was done. The employment contract says she cannot be terminated except for cause, and no cause was stated. Progressive discipline has to be followed. Human resources review and performance evaluation. None of those steps were done. And you say, why would they not follow due process in a termination? And then the stealth with which it was done in a late night meeting, and then someone said, well, let's extend the time as no extension was allowed. And the Pacifica bylaws states very clearly that for a special meeting, and a telephone meeting is considered a special meeting, for a special meeting, a specific agenda items have to be stated in the notice to the people. Well, that was not done. So I think this termination on a due process basis alone was wrong. The other thing is, what is underlying this? There's a book out, Radio on the Air, I forget what it's called. It includes information about the history of progressive radio, and also includes the attempted coup in 1999. And it has in there the exact words of a memo that was written by Michael Palmer, who was a real estate developer in Houston and a member of the local station board in Houston. In it, he writes to Mary Frances Berry, who I believe was the head of the board or something like that at the time, and he says, all right, we should consider selling WBAI and KPFA, and it could bring in lots of money. And with apparently Mary Frances Berry agreed with this. Well, now, the people who are opposed to the termination of Summer Reese have been making a big issue, including myself, of preserving the integrity of the network, not selling off any station. These are all very valuable properties, and they're very important if we're going to build a grassroots movement to bring some change to this country. We need to have these radio outlets in these important markets. And the Save KPFA people have not responded that no, we want to keep the network too. If they don't want to sell it off, let them say we don't want to sell it off. Now, Summer Reese has said, well, I don't want to sell off any station. Now, I don't want to impugn anybody's motives, but there's a lot of clouds around this whole thing, and I want to bring a little sunshine into these clouds so we see what's really going on. What are the real agendas of the people who are doing this very destructive act, which could destroy the network, an adventurous act. And anyway, I ask for you to consider my ideas and come to the right conclusion. Agree with me.
In this, as in many things, I think there are various layers. The firing of Summer Reese on itself and of itself is wrong. But the fact that it was done without due process is just undemocratic. Further than that, KPFA and Pacifica form a vital role in society. There's not stations like this anywhere. I would hate to see that go away because it's so needed. And on an even larger level, just how important it is to deal with each other fairly. And if we can't deal within ourselves, within our own organizations fairly, how can we expect others whose causes we adopt, issues that we take up, how do we expect them to act fairly? One of the weaknesses that the left has often historically had is that we tend to split each other into factions and not unite behind a cause. As the right is very good at being able to do that, I think the more that we're able to do that and to treat each other fairly within our organizations and how we deal with others, then I think we're going to be much more capable of affecting social change. Thank you.
My name is Kurt Gray. Some people here know me and some people don't. Me and a handful of other people who are in this room, many people actually have passed, helped get the elections and to make the subscribers and unpaid and staff members. So that didn't just happen. That's not something that existed, and it wasn't done by the goodwill of the people at KPFA. But they were sort of forced into it because of the particular situation in 1999 and 2000 and 2001, and we took full advantage to make subscribers members. Basically, in 1993, this movement started, and I'm hearing the same stuff that I heard 21 years ago at a meeting at the Ashkenaz, David Nadel's place. And when I got involved then, I quickly realized that the problem was, I didn't have a name for it, but that there was a culture of patronage at the station, a long time culture of patronage at the station, deeply ingrained, that it started when they decided to pay people to be on the air. And the other problem, since I'd come from KALX, where you don't keep your show forever, was that people keep their show forever, whether they're paid on-air staff or not. They keep their show forever. And so even if they all hate each other, they lock arms against anybody else. I quickly realized that in 1993 because those meetings were about a bunch of unpaid staff losing their programs, and all these listeners came out, and hardly any staff came out. And when we went, some representatives went to the station to talk to the staff, they kind of didn't want to, the unpaid staff, the ones losing their shows, kind of didn't want to talk to us, which made it clear that the listeners were supposed to give money, but they were kind of beyond the pale in terms of internal issues, that was a rule that everybody understood inside the station if they want to retain their position. So it's basically the same culture now. It's not necessarily the same people, though in some cases it is. I mean, Jesus, the people who've been heading the news department have been there for something like 30 years. Whose good idea was that? That's not the way KPFA ran for its first 30 years. You know, and it ran pretty good, as I recall. So that's basically your problem there. Those people kind of do anything, and now they're willing to wreck the network. If they think they've got funding to run the station, maybe an endowment of some sort. All these paid people will keep their jobs, and they'll just break KPFA off, even if it means that we lose the other stations and the network goes. That's what they'll do to escape the accountability and transparency that the new bylaws, the democratic bylaws, the ones that made staff and listeners members, that's what they will do to escape that accountability, so they can run it as they like. So I just want to give you a little historical perspective. If you want more information, you can go to savekpfa.net. Is it still up there? It's still up there, isn't it?
I think it will take you through a couple of points.
Right, savekpfa.net, and then there's 3 portals, and one of them is the real Save KPFA. These people call themselves Save KPFA. I helped found the real Save KPFA that got you elections. First Save KPFA, then Take Back KPFA, then the Coalition for a Democratic Pacifica. All the same organization, mostly the same people. These people...
I was part of a radio station that was based on KPFA that was in Dallas, Texas, KNON, and we used a lot of the same scheduling that KPFA did, and we love KPFA. And I think that KPFA really needs to have a very strong listener board that has influence. I don't see I see the detriment of having high-paid DJs that work all week long, so you have to give them a living wage. And I think that if, you know, there's plenty of people that have the skill and interest to do one show a week that need to replace the high-paid staff. KPFA is not financially sustainable with these high-paid staff members that are egomaniacs and that are trying to destroy the network and have no care whatsoever about giving people voice. In KNON, we talked about these kind of listener-sponsored stations being the voice of the people. Eight corporations own all of the commercial radio stations. This is highly, highly needed. Our founding fathers were very worried that we would not have access to the media. There is no democracy without access to the media, with people having access. These people that are paid have no concern about people having access to the media. From what I can tell, they're trying to make KPFA into an NPR station, and they want to get rid of the New York station, which is unacceptable in my opinion, and then which ones will be next after that. What they're talking about is dismantling the ability for people in the United States to have a democratic say or being able to hear information. We know that the other stations on TV and the radio are not giving us any kind of news. Half of it's made up and it comes straight from the CIA. This is a known fact, and it's not democratic. Without more democracy in KPFA and in Pacifica, we're going to be in very deep trouble. Thank you very much. And Summer Reese needs to keep that job.
My name is Paul Karsh. I'm a KPFA listener and sometime contributor. Perhaps I'm missing something, but I've not seen any attempt to, as they say in law, stipulate as to the facts of the case. The charge that Summer was discharged without proper procedure, I've not seen an answer to that. I get the impression that people don't like her because of where she's been and who with. Not seen an answer to that. Does that mean, is that grounds for discharge? The recent rehiring of the CFO, what's behind that? I think it'd be really great if we could get some consensus as to the aspects of the case we can agree upon.
I remember coming to the first meeting we had, I don't know how many years ago, or one of the first, and there was already problems brewing. And Tracy spoke about, well, I think it was about the finances. And she was the first one to make sense to me. And I mean, I could follow what she was saying. I see more and more vitriol every year with each group really dissing the other group. And this is getting us nowhere. I feel it's really destructive to the whole process, destructive to the program, to the jewel that we have there, and we're going to lose it if we don't stop attacking each other. Can't we please sit down or stand up or do whatever we like best and follow through on a positive note? All of this is not helpful at all, and I don't want to see. I had nothing growing up as a kid. We had nothing. I'm ready to give it over to the kids if they'll do it. So let's get some of the younger people put under and give them a chance to sit down and say what they want and do a little work here.
Right now, KPFA is pretty much a mixed blessing. My name is Doug Buchwald. I've been a longtime station listener and volunteer. I worked at the station long enough ago that the first question you asked people who called in to give money wasn't, now, which of the premiums are you going to get? And then you'd have a 10-minute discussion about that. And when they didn't basically have so many infomercials. That was a long time ago. There are two questions that come to my mind when we talk about KPFA now. Is it a community radio station? And is it an independent radio station? Right now, I'll just talk about the first one. Is it a community radio station? When Tracy Rosenberg spoke earlier, she asked the question, how do people feel when they approach KPFA if they're a member of the community? Do they feel that there's an open door and they're welcoming? Or do they find resistance? I have to say, I have made approaches to KPFA because I care about the programs. I want to give feedback to some of the hosts, and I have found it almost impossible to get them to respond to any messages that are left, almost impossible to even find out how to contact them. Many of them don't ever respond to their emails. I have even gone to the great effort to find out how to contact Richard Brodsky because he's not on the phone list when you choose to contact him. I was able to contact him. I contacted him because there was one program in particular, it was on Letters and Politics, in which they had two guests, and you'd think, well, maybe he had two guests. Maybe you'd think they'd have guests on either side if they have two guests. Well, actually, the guests were both from the organization that controls Barack Obama's presidential campaign and his presidential talking points, Center for American Progress. So, and they actually had financial interest in the opinions they were given. I called Richard because I wanted to ask, why don't you at least say who these people, where they're from? Let the audience know instead of presenting them as if they are independent analysts. I got the worst responses from KPFA. The host of the show wouldn't even talk to me. He told me, you must submit your questions for me in writing and then I will respond to them. Like it's a court of law or something. The responses I got from Richard were, I support the host completely. I think he's great. Nobody addressed the central issues I had, which were, if we have conflict of interest rules, and we do on KPFA, why don't we let people know if many of the guests, or some of the guests even, have hidden associations that affect what they're saying? That's my question.
My name is Vivian Workington, and I've been a listener for probably 30 years and a supporter for probably 20. I've become increasingly alarmed at what I'm hearing on KPFA and I'll give an example of last week. I don't know how many people heard Brian Edwards Teaker interview a guy named Ian Morris from Stanford, who wrote a book called War, What Is It Good For? And he really means it. It's good for something. It causes people to be less violent. That's his premise. And I kept thinking, well, okay, is there another side? Because this is KPFA. And I'm telling you, Brian Edwards Teaker did not, challenge him. And then lo and behold, this morning, maybe somebody heard me because I was on the radio, mainly because Philip, the guest, Ian Morris, didn't show up on time. So he had to turn it over to the listener Collins, and he said, it's scary. He really said that. And then, so I just basically said that it was kind of Orwellian for them to twice now program a guy who is saying war is peace. And I mean, it's their new take. The elites are telling us that war is peace. And anyway, I've become involved because of this, and I've found out, what else did I've been noticing just this limited listener input. Whenever I call Philip Muldari's show, well, today, I just talked a little bit, he had me cut off, right? I was talking, I realized that, I wasn't on anymore. And he was yammering on, But I think that the other side has been doing these shenanigans for a long, long time. And I don't think this is some equal thing where, those crazy left-wingers that just can't get along. No, there is a cabal, and they want to destroy. And this is happening everywhere. This is happening in the Berkeley city government. I'm not kidding. The libraries, everywhere. There is an infiltration of people who want to make the discourse theirs. And I think this is our opportunity. I mean, Summer Reese, I'm an occupier a few times, and she's standing up, and we have to bite on and not let go. And that's what an activist told me once, and I'm an activist.
Okay, ready? Okay, I'm Ann Garrison. I'm a KPFA programmer, and I wrote down what I wanted to say in order to respect the time limit, but I want to improvise to say that I am so impressed with what a number of the listeners have said here, including Wanda. I think that was Wanda who just spoke, and the gentleman who was speaking about the Center for American Progress. I'm so impressed that I really want to say I wish we had more call-in shows so that we could have more listeners on the air. Okay, now quickly, as I said, I'm a KPFA programmer. I wrote an essay about the Pacifica mess for Counterpunch. In that, I referred to my first-hand experience on a KPFA hiring committee that acted in ignorance of California law, the CWA labor contract, and written Pacifica policy on affirmative action. When I brought this to the attention of former KPFA General Manager Andrew Phillips, he responded abusively and refused to reconvene the committee to avert a legal liability still pending. Now, members of Save KPFA, and even one member of the Save KPFA caucus on the station board, have, for writing this, called me a liar, an idiot, with no credibility. Well, there were 4 other people on that hiring committee, all of the paid staff. If any of them want to come forward and dispute what I said, if they wanted to, they would have done so a long time ago, and they can still do so now. Okay. Okay, now, do I have another minute? Yeah. Or am I totally out of time?
No, go ahead.
Okay. On March 8th, I received what is no doubt the greatest honor I'll ever receive in my life, was the Victoire Ingabire Mohose Democracy and Peace Prize for promoting peace in the Great Lakes region of Africa. The other recipient this year was Perry Sample, a Spanish senator and the first high-ranking official to speak out about human rights abuse in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. This was for my reporting for the past 5 years, some of which was on KPFA, some in other outlets. I'm going to cut to the chase here, which is that nevertheless, The paid news directors of KPFA refused even to give me a KPFA press pass, and they preferred to read the Reuters or AP reports or play the FSN reports expressing the prevailing lie about what really happened in Rwanda and what the consequences were in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is disputed by several other people who won this prize, and a long list of scholars and international defense lawyers, and they include Noam Chomsky and Ed Herman, the co-authors of Manufacturing Consent.
I've been passing out over the past couple of years this little graph that sort of illustrates what caused the problem over the past 5-6 years. You can see that, we had a lot of income during the mid-2005-6, and we doubled the payroll by over 125%. And then the economy tanked. Of course you're going to have a problem. Of course you're going to have cuts. But what happened was that when the cuts were made by Arling Engelhardt, what they said was that she was an anti-union, union-busting person. Well, Arling Engelhardt grew up in a union family. Her dad was, a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and he's also president of the American Federation of Teachers. But why make that kind of a lie? Then I just noticed recently in the same KPFA thing, it says, talking about the Summer Reese, the recent director, that she is involvement with a right-wing anti-tax groups. Well, she's not right-wing. Her anti-tax stuff comes from anti-war, just like, Kathy Kerry. But why say such a thing? And it's disturbing because, Pacifica and KPFA is about truth and integrity. And when you start not following your truth and integrity, what are they trying to do? That is a big concern for me. I know that everybody has two sides, everyone wants to keep their jobs, but once you start distorting the truth, that is a big issue for an institution like us. That's what it is.
I just wanted to reply a couple of things that our chair said about why some of this is happening. A lot of people feel that the firing though was unjust and illegal, and that's working its way out in the court system. But why would we want to just submit and roll over to what we think was wrong? To where legal actions are happening now, but why go through the process of the police and trying to evict people when we feel it was wrong? We shouldn't have to just give up and submit to that. I support process in the process of firing her. I admitted a few times I'm not the biggest supporter of her. I had issues with her not contacting me as a local station board representative on a number of occasions. KPFA united against the program changes that were about to happen a couple months ago. The whole station united, both sides, all factions, whatever. And I think we united because there was a lack of process. And so why should we not unite now when this big giant lack of process and the firing of the executive director has just happened? We need to stick to process. The chair also mentioned that the occupiers, not trespassers, are blocking work, but a lot of us feel that the actions taken by the board is what had caused this, and that's what's causing work to slow down and to be impaired. Two last things I'll say briefly is Democracy Now!, how we owe that's unbelievable to me too, and I've heard on a number of occasions on Democracy Now! Where she practiced, had interviews about debt forgiveness, so maybe someone should approach her for some debt forgiveness for KPFA, and maybe she will be open to that possibility. And finally, I would just ask our Pacifica National Board representatives that are here to come up and explain some of the answers. The person that made the motion to fire our executive director is sitting over here, and you've heard a lot of questions today about what's happening. So I was hoping that maybe he can come up and answer a couple of the questions that people have presented. That's it, thank you.
When I hear the chair of LSB board saying at the opening remarks that she said she used to be president of one of the local of UAW. If you are officer of any union, workers union, don't you fight for any members who are fired for without just cause? What did you do when you are as an officer? Did you defend the members when any of the members are fired without just cause and without process of
Yes.
defending this?
Yes, I did.
And why now then, on this point, your action seemed to me that totally opposite side, like management side. Why are you doing it? Seemed to me you didn't learn anything.
My name is Andrea Pritchett, and I'm a listener representative on the local station board. And I want to thank everybody for being here today, because I think the conversation is crucial. It really is crucial. This is a super scary time. I think we've been hearing the word crisis for about 20 years now, but I think we've arrived. I think it's full-fledged now. And I just noticed that, I work with a group called Cop Watch, and I notice just how it feels in my belly when, to hear, I didn't really understand that folks from the Pacifica National Board majority were actually collaborating with the police and trying to organize about how to have them kind of handle the situation for them. And that, I'm kind of shocked. I actually, at the last LSB, I congratulated Marky Wilkerson and folks for not calling the police. Because we're Pacifica. There's a pacifist in there somewhere. And the police are, when we invoke the police, we're saying it's okay to use violence on the situation. And I hear you, that it is frustrating and confusing and inconvenient for Margie not to be able to go into the office and look at the records. There's a protest happening. It's a protest. And we as leftists don't believe that the response to protest is a beatdown. We believe it is a conversation. And for the last 6 months, we've had on our agenda for the LSB to come up with a policy for when it is acceptable. When, if ever, is it acceptable to call the police? And I understand people say, well, if there's an imminent threat and if somebody's going to get beaten, that's not this situation. So I really want to ask those of you who have any sway with the Pacifica National Board members who are doing this, tell them no. Let us work this out. I think we have to assess for ourselves. You'll know a tree by its fruit. Who is a better steward of the station? And when they talk about, oh, this is horrible that we don't have access to the national office, we have to get in there. Hey, who was it, without any benefit of any consultation with the local station board, that our representatives, so-called representatives, without asking us one question about how we felt about Summer's performance, go off and vote to turn this provocative, disruptive, you knew it was like blowing up a bomb in a marketplace. You knew it was going to do that. And if you didn't, where have you been? So you must have done it intentionally to distract the attentions of so many good people away from the work of building the station. Who is the steward? I'll tell you this. I was there the morning when Summer Reese, what did she do? She cut the lock off the door so who could get in? The workers, who had not even been told that this action was coming down. There was no contingency. They thought something was blocking the door. They had no clue. Why do you look like that? I was there. I have the videotape. I can show it to you. So anyway, look for who is actually taking care.
Yeah, I'm a new member of the local station board, and at the last board meeting, we unanimously, I believe it was unanimous, passed a motion that is the sense of the board that the program called, what's that program? FSN. What's the stand for again? Feature Story News should be pulled from the air. And the reason that we voted for that was that it consistently broadcasts a pro-State Department bias. And this has no place in our network. The airwaves are flooded with pro-State Department on controversial issues like Ukraine, or Libya, Syria, or something like that. Now, I bring this up as an example of how the factions don't always fight each other. I mean, this is an example where we all came together about this, and I do hope that there can be some kind of mediation to resolve this. Some kind of, in other words, let's get some light on this. Like someone said, how about some stipulations? Get together and sit down at the same table and work this out instead of just doing this on an adversarial basis. It's not right. But the reason I came up the second time was to talk about this issue of the feature story news and how it doesn't just involve feature story news. I was listening to the KPFA Evening News on April 22nd, and they had a report on Ukraine. And it could have been written by Hillary Clinton or John Kerry or one of these people in the State Department. And this has no place, and they're still ripping and reading the Wire and reading it. And the Wire is a establishment wire. It's sympathetic to the AP or the Reuters. And I think this is unacceptable in our network. And so it's not just a question of feature story news. It's pervasive in the evening news department, and it's been that way for a long time. I remember we had a delegation from the Haiti Action Committee that came to meet with the news department when the U.S. government was trying to destabilize the government of President Aristide leading up to the 200th anniversary of the Haitian Revolution in 2004, leading up to that coup d'etat. And they did give us a hearing, and there was a slight adjustment in the coverage, but there was still plenty of stuff that was sympathetic to the people who wanted to overthrow President Aristide. So this is a long-standing problem, and there doesn't seem to be willingness to get to the heart of it. And I hope this resolution that passed at the LSB about feature story news will be taken to heart, and there'll be a change in the overall attitude that's displayed in the evening news. Thank you.
Because we have this group, Save KPFA here, who say that they're fighting for KPFA and the network, but KPFA does have a history. And part of that history is calling the police. And who did they call the police on? Do people know who that was? Nadra Foster. One unpaid black programmer. They called the police on her, and she was beaten up and dragged out of the station. And some people said they were surprised about that. How are you surprised about that when you call the police on particularly a black person in Berkeley or anywhere in this country? These things happen. Shit happens. Now, there's some serious financial mismanagement which has been raised and not answered by Margie and other people, and I asked to interview her, particularly the fact that they can't get a financial report of how much money they've raised in these book series that they do. Why is that? This is the responsibility of the paid staff at KPFA. They have a responsibility to provide a financial report on how much money the station is collecting. And if they can't do that, they have to be held accountable. And if you don't hold them accountable, then you're responsible for covering this up. That's how it is. If you don't take care of your financial responsibility, especially when you're paid, and yet you're telling people that they have to take care of their responsibility, there's a double standard. So in my view, that's part of the reason that Summer was fired. It was removed. The other reason is that Summer stopped the removal of the morning mix programming because Richard Perotsky and the management wanted to remove the morning mix programming without consulting programmers. Actually, he had set up a program grid that removed people and changed people around without even consulting the programmers. Now, what kind of management is that? That you would present programming changes without even consulting the programmers who were involved in that. He tried that twice. And the second time around, it was stopped by Summer. Now, right after that, she's removed. I think the people that launched this, I would say, coup to remove Summer have plans about programming at KPFA, and those include getting rid of the unpaid programmers, particularly in prime time. That's part of their agenda. And they say it. That's what KPFA does. They want to bring in a program from Los Angeles on prime time instead of have local programming. I believe the only way we're going to get increased listenership is to have more local programming, more community programming, to get voices in the community that need to be heard out throughout Northern California, not getting rid of local programming. So we have to fight for local programming and to have a fair and transparent process at KPFA. Thank you.
I'm Sylvia Schertzer. My sister Cynthia Johnson and I were arrested longest day of the year, June 21st, 1999. Before most people were on the internet or cell phones, and we blocked the door of the national office. Strong-armed people came. Remember Jane, what's her name, in the wheelchair? They were pushing her around. It wasn't fun. However, that first encounter with the police, they were very willing to negotiate. We want this to end peacefully. They had some very good tactics. When my mother met my dad up at Cal in the 20s, we were very proud of our Berkeley Police Department because they were educated, university educated, and they were know how to negotiate. They also have been very patient with my mentally ill son. They've treated him with kindness and respect. I saw a big change when Mary Frances Berry called up, was it Janet Reno? Because we got some of their emails, and said, you need to take a stronger hand on these protesters. And I was standing next to the assistant police chief, African-American guy, when Miss Hanrahan was climbing up the ladder there at the station. And the police were beating her, and it was awful, it was terrible. So that's not who we are, that's not what we want. You know, I remember my parents thinking Lou Hill was a comrade indeed. So I want to save this station. I don't like all the contention, but I do want transparency. I think it's really, really important. I love that graph that the gentleman made. Follow the money. What could be simpler? You know, I'll give my $25. I was a teacher for 35 years. I was a librarian. I believe in free speech. I believe in peace. And I think we can work it out. So I'm glad we had this meeting in this place. I'm called to be a proud member also here.
Listener and sometimes volunteer for the station. All right, I'll speak into the microphone. I'm Brian Lipson, a listener and sometimes volunteer for the station. And I'm really appreciating hearing people. I think we can work it out. I love hearing about transparency. And I just want to offer myself up. I'm happy to do any work, speak to any person, do any research, you know, to contribute to cohesive resolution of the situation. I think, yeah, it's a critical time. And, you know, I know people who are longtime programmers who are not egomaniacs. I know people who had something to do with the situation of the firing of Summer who are not trying to destroy the network. I know people who have been involved with sitting in or occupying the station who are not trying to obstruct the process. And you can just fill in the blank for the other things that have come up for today. So I just want to offer myself up to acknowledge the goodwill that's behind all these opinions. Really appreciate this event, and come find me if anyone has anything that, you know, that needs to be done for the running of the station or the resolving of any of these issues.
Thank you. It was really great to hear everything that everybody had to say. So, a couple things. I wanted to bring a message from the national board members who are in fact having a meeting right now. Mr. Fuentes didn't choose to attend, but they are having a meeting, and they wanted to say that they look forward to seeing the video and hearing what everybody had to say in Berkeley. I'm going to send them the video as soon as we have it up. And they also have an archive of the meeting that they had today, and they hope that you all will take a chance to listen to it. They didn't yell at each other. That's the word that I'm supposed to pass out to you. They didn't yell. I guess a part of what I want to say is long term, I mean, I've been a part of the governance dysfunction now for 6 years. I mean, I served 6 years on the local station board, 4 years on the national board, and it wasn't easy. Dysfunction has a purpose, and when you look at anything that's going on, I think you have to go cui bono, who benefits, and there's been a benefit in keeping a sort of constant chaos going on. So what we have to do long term, once we get past the short-term crisis and we have leadership once again for a while, so we have to look at why we have had 11 executive directors in 10 years. Why we haven't had a program director for more than a year at KPFA in a decade. We have to look at sort of what this constant chaos making, what the purpose of it is, and how we're going to end it and stop it. And part of what I want to put out is, I love our bylaws in the sense that they try to be as open and as porous and as free as possible. And everything that is good in human beings went into creating those bylaws, but folks, they're a little too open. And we have to take a look at balancing what we really want here, which is a programming commons, because when I hear you all talk, it's about what's on the radio, what you hear, that's what matters, and how we can run a not-for-profit organization in a responsible manner. And we can bring those two things together, but there's a couple of details that we got wrong. So the long-term plan here is, how do we structure an organization that will be a democracy of programming and a responsible, accountable, transparent, professionally run not-for-profit organization. We can't do both.
I had taken only 5 minutes of my 10 minutes at the beginning and asked if I could go now and have 5 minutes. So I have a few things to cover. Free speech radio news, rather than feature story news, went under when Summer failed to pay $14,000 that they needed to keep operating. And they have been in existence for, I think, 13 years. And yes, I was a union president for many years. And let me say that the local station board could not possibly have had a discussion of firing of Summer Reese, because that would have violated her privacy and her rights. The place that you have that kind of discussion is the place that has the authority to do that. And it is not proper to have chats or conversations or meetings about somebody outside of that authority. So that would not have been proper. I was not privy. Save KPFA did not have a discussion about firing her. Actually, I thought many of us on the board had big problems with her and was surprised at the reaction to her firing, actually. I mean, she is somebody who put out a memo to call the police when, if J.R. Valerie came around. There were discussions about, she was unresponsive to outreach to her. She fired without paying the compensation all of the WBAI staff, although she did keep one guy, Gary Null, who's a HIV denier, who sells his own vitamin brands. I've got the 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, you got 3 more.
In any case, right. So there were a lot of reasons, and I think that my understanding after the fact is that there was a feeling, given the situation, the financial situation that she was not forthcoming about to the board, that it would be a failure of fiduciary responsibility not to get her out of that position. In any case, somebody said, I think David, you said that nobody has ever said that we want to keep Pacifica intact and that we we see this as a precious resource and an important one as we go forward in a critical time in not only the history of this country, but in the world and of the planet, and that this independent resource is something that is precious to everybody in every side. Andrea Margie had not called the police at the time of the meeting. And it baffles me when people talk about our bombastic attitude and when we're trying to, when Margie has said from the moment this happened that she was for mediation, and mediation has been refused. And so there's a question of what do you do? Is Summer going to live there forever? And are we supposed to, if we're trying to carry on the business? I'm an occupier too. I spent 2 weeks in Zuccotti Park in 2011. So I'm an activist also.
In any case, I think that we have to get to the other side of this, and we have to be able to function. And the seizure of the office is not permitting the functioning.
My name is Cynthia. I belong to this fellowship. I'm also on the local station board. And I just do want to point out, I'm a little baffled too that we would think that talking about fiduciary responsibility, darlings, please. I try to like everyone on the board because I know most of them have really good intentions and maybe we just have different visions. However, what clinched it for me about Summer, maybe I don't agree with every absolute thing that she did before, but what she could have done when she was so illegally fired without any notice and process, she could have sued right off the bat. She stayed in there and is working. Her staff is working. Maybe that whole staff will get fired. I don't know what'll happen eventually, but she is carrying on the fiduciary responsibility. To me, fiduciary responsibility was firing her. And I think that the strong part of it is that she stayed on and didn't sue, is doing the work, and is trying to save the network. So I want to respect everybody's point of view. I agree that we can work this out, but you can't also just, I think I'm an occupier. I've been an occupier before, like with my sister Sylvia. I've been arrested maybe 60, 70 times altogether. So, not as much as my late partner, but I love what somebody said about protest. When this was done, and it seemed, I'm very happy that Jose came today, and I wish you would take your time and maybe shed some more light on this. It was very good of you to come, both of you, because we do want to talk.